I love it when I get to do that. All right. I got this stool. I can, people would prefer that. Okay, hello. Hi, welcome to today's conversation. How are you doing? Jeff Pattee here, in case you don't know who I am. And what we wanted to do today is talk about it's kind of a combination of two things. One, it was a direction that came out of the annual meeting to talk about the financial situation of the church, and I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we approved the budget at the annual meeting. I don't know. We approved it with the comeback. Yeah, okay. So this is the first phase of that comeback. Also, too, coming out of the SWAT process, one of the goals was to talk about the financial situation of the congregation. So today, Connie and Laura and I will give you an update of where we are so far in this effort on that particular goal, talk about what the next steps are in that particular goal, and then when we're going to come back and revisit that with the congregation later on in the summertime. This morning, we're going to get a little history to understand what our pledging process has looked like the past 10 years, get some ideas of relationships of pledges and pledges, dollars per pledge, et cetera, and then talk about what we've done since the February 1st into the detail of the things that have gone on and where our new gap is, and then we can go from there talking about it as well. But to open us up, Connie's going to lead us in a quick prayer.
Let us be in the spirit of prayer. Let us remember that from God, to God, and through God are all things. Holy One, we come before you this day in awe and reverence. We come for thanksgiving for the gift of this day, for the renewal of this earth, for spring, for growth, for blossoming. As we gather here this day, we seek your direction and your guidance for the renewal and growth of this community of faith. Grant us wisdom. Grant us courage in the discussions and the conversations we have. In the name of the risen Christ, we pray all these things. Amen.
Okay, some of this you have seen at the annual meeting, but it's always good to take a look at it a second time. The pages that we passed out are all the same color, so unfortunately maybe I should have done it in different colors, but I just used what was in the office. The first one we're going to take a look at is called it says 10-year history, and it's got a lot of numbers on it. And it just gives you, it's a great way to see the trend line of our church in the last 10 years, from 2012 to 2021. And you can see that the operating income, which is the first part of the report, you can see we've been declining in our pledging, whether it's operating or undesignated. The other loose offering, outside groups and donations are not a major part of our funding, but they do play a small part in it. And you can see from 2012, we were having revenues or operating income of $255,000, and then in 2021, we're at $182,000. And I think when we look at another report, we're down to about $157,000. So the trend is not, the trend is your friend, but this is not our friend. And if you look below, you'll see the pledging units, and this will explain for the most part why we're seeing a decline in our operating income. Pledging units were 74, and in 2021, we had 44 units, but only 39 pledged. Now the difference is there are people that don't pledge, but they do also do time and talent. So I looked at the whole membership, and I looked at those who do not pledge, and there's like a handful of people who do not pledge, and for the majority of it, those folks are just doing time and talent, and they're not financially supporting the church. The good news is in the middle of this page, and that is our operating expenses, and for the most part, they're pretty stable. They're kind of almost boring, they almost can put you to sleep. But the biggest part of our expenses are our people costs and obviously maintaining the building that we reside in. And then we have some other expenses, office, and then our ministries are they're about 5, 6, 7% of our total operating budget. So the most of it has to do with people costs and also with the building and grounds. I'm not going to go into the mission budget because really we're looking at is really the operating, because that's where we have some real serious issues that we have to deal with. And I think we're going to go over what the Finance Committee has been looking at to buy us some time, at least in 2022, we're buying ourselves some time. It's what happens in 2023. Okay, I'm sorry. You want me to go?
How's this? All right. One of the things in the 10-year history, though, if you look at it, there's a couple things we need to notice on that number when Laura's talking about the pledging units. You'll see that they dropped from 16 to 17. That is when Rex Piercy retired. So if you think about the transition period, it was in 16 when we had Greg Skiba as our intentional interim. He talked about the status of a church. If you remember that one sermon where we had a big circle and showed where the church was on that circle. Sorry, it's a whiteboard, I got to draw. So this is the big circle, and churches start here and they go this way. We need a new pen. And then they start to decline. You know, we were kind of pegging ourselves right there. And we had to make a choice back then, it was in 16, what we wanted to do. Not that we couldn't come back, marker, to come back here and regroup, but we just had to be aware of it. And then some things happened. Emily came in 17, and then the pandemic started in 20. So all the things that we were hoping we could start and use as momentum coming out of that interim period basically hit the skids. And you can see that in the number of pledge units. We continued to decline in membership from that point. And I think that's important to think about. There's some outside forces that have kind of layered up on top of where we were that we had no idea of being able to forecast, but because of it, it's complicated the position for us a little bit. So just something I wanted to share with everybody here.
There's another report that our financial secretary put together, and it's a 10-year history, and it looks like this. It doesn't have as compressed, numbers on it, but it tells us a similar story. We have fewer pledging units, but we have pledging units that give a significant amount of money to the church. So when we had 69 pledging units, the average pledge was $3,663. Oh, sorry. Okay. What this report, and Ms. Shirley is the one who put this report together, so we had an idea where we were at in the church as it relates to what this report was telling us. We wanted to know what our average pledge was. And so what we're seeing is that the average pledge over the last 10 years went from $3,663 to $4,951 per unit. And you only have 39 units. So what you're seeing is that you have a core group of units that are supporting this church. If something happens to any one of those units, it just shows, I think it just shows what Jeff just went through in the decline of our church. We have fewer members, we have an aging congregation, which is I think one of the reasons why we have this dollar amount. And so this is the situation that our church is facing, an aging, declining church, although the church that we still have right now is significantly still supporting the church on an average pledge unit.
And it's not to say, we don't want to say that, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Yeah, our numbers are, but I mean, and when we go through some of the numbers, you're still seeing that we've got a decent position to build off of. It's not that desperate kind of situation. It's just that what we were hoping to do in 16 and 17 has just been pushed forward down the street, and we just have to deal with that and recognize that piece. So the next chart, I think, which would be helpful, was to talk about the balance sheet. This chart right here.
Sorry. This is a balance sheet as of April 30th, and granted, it's where we are on one particular point in time. Doesn't mean this is where we're going to be at the end of the year, but it's just telling you where we are, because there will be cash flows coming in and going out. As of April 30th, we had $107,000 in cash. And then we do use our credit card. The pension board doesn't want us to issue checks, and so we put it on our credit card, so that's why the credit card is pretty high. But the short-term liabilities would be the credit card the bill would be coming due, and then the funds that we collect during the year for the Christmas fund and 1 great hour sharing. So those monies will go out because money is given to us on behalf of those campaigns. So the short-term liability is $7,613. That leaves us with $99,500 in cash. Right now, we're going into our reserves. The reserves, we've segregated our cash because we have very specific purposes for this cash. It doesn't mean it has to be in concrete. But we have almost $73,000 in capital reserve. That's for the building and for major repairs in the building. We have now, in the building strategic plan, we have $10,706. We had $20,000 in there, but we've reduced that by about $9,200. Those monies the purpose of those monies was to bring our sanctuary to ADA compliance and any other things that we might want to do. We have $8,000 in the Deacons Fund. We have designated money, $3,500 in designated, and $4,212 in undesignated, giving us, it's not really a liability, it's it's cash that's been segregated for specific purposes of $99,531. And granted, we're going to be using those monies going forward for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So some of those accounts will go down as we go through the year. We're going to use the building strategic planning first because that was just something that we wish we could have done, but we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't going to happen.
But the key takeaway from this piece of paper is we basically have, as of right now, $100,000 in the bank. Various funds, various pieces, but if if some disaster hit, we have $100,000, which isn't a bad number to have. I mean, that's pretty good to have $100,000. Greg, you can help us if that's typical for churches or rare, I mean, to have that kind of cash in reserve.
Some churches have those kinds of reserves. Some churches have a lot more. Some churches don't have any.
Yeah. So what Greg just said is that the $100,000 is by no means. There are churches that have greater amounts, but there are many churches that have far less than what we have. So we're probably in a good, we're in a decent shape, I'd say, from a financial piece.
But I want to back up on that one because we're not done with the year. And when we look at the next report, those numbers, that $99,000 could go down, I would say, another $40,000 to $45,000 between now and the end of the year.
So now this one.
Okay.
And so this is the amended operating budget sheet here, if you could turn to this page. Some may see it as a yellow sheet.
Oh, you want me to go over?
Yeah, let's just go over this as it's laid out right now.
Okay. I did you guys all a favor. I took the variance column out because I know that was just throwing everybody. It's just another column to have to look at. But think about this as your checking account. How much money your employer's paying you, and then what are your household expenses. So that's what this report shows: operating income and operating expenses. In the first column is a 2022 budget. The second column is where we are where we would be in the budget, and that's all we're doing is taking 4/12 of, we're just making it streamlined, like a straight line depreciation. We're just saying that every month was going to be similar to the last month. So that's the budget, and then what our actual experience is as of April 30th. We'll address the amended budget later. Okay. So right now, our operating income is $56,900, so we're a little bit ahead of what we expect to be at the end of the first 4 months. However, our expenses are almost $78,000, which is 77,000, almost 78,000, so about $3,000 above what we expected to be in the first 4 months of the year. I need to say two things. Snow removal, we've gone through that budget. And thanks to Northern Illinois Gas and the price of gas, we've already, by the end of June, when we make one more payment for Northern Illinois Gas on June 1st, and we'll go through almost all $7,500 on our Northern Illinois gas bill that we budgeted. So those are the things that we created, that being above actual than what we anticipated at the beginning of the year.
And from a forecasting standpoint, don't anticipate energy dollars to go down the balance of the year? So again, that's something to kind of keep in the mind that, and this is, it's not just unique to us. I mean, everybody in the world's facing the same thing, but we don't see any breaks this coming year in that cycle of increasing energy costs. And again, from the snow removal, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, so we can't forecast that. Yeah, Roxy. What is pastor relations?
Oh my gosh.
That's his
I can't
mom,
remember
his
the pieces
dad,
that
his
are-
sister.
It's pastor meetings, pastor retreats and conferences, public pulpit supply.
Yeah.
So this is just timing, but because Pastor Greg took a good part of his vacation time in January, we had 3 months of pulpit supply. That's $600. So you get that will even out during the year, but you get hit in the first 4 months of the year. Good question.
Yeah. If there are any other questions off of this chart, Laura, anything else you want to?
No.
What we want to talk about is, just going to use the board here. At the annual meeting, our shortfall, our budget shortfall at that time was $83,300. Since then, we've made adjustments of approximately $15,700, and to show where as of today, our budget shortfall for this year is $67,600. So let us talk about what went into that $15,700 adjustment so you know what we did. I think that's important. Number one, what we did is on this expense line, there's an insurance line for our church. And historically, we've always paid that insurance in November for the following year. So in November of '21, we paid $9,000 to cover our insurance for all of 2022. In November of 2022, we had another $9,000-ish plug to cover 2023. Well, you don't have to pay your insurance in one sum. As you all know, you can pay different amounts. And so what we did is we adjusted the budget so that we're now paying quarterly. So that first commitment in November of this year went from $9,000 to $2,500. So there was a $6,000 or $7,000 savings to the 2022 budget by making that adjustment. Now, keep in mind though, in 2023, we're on the quarterly process. We can't kick that can any further down. So we still will be at $9,000 there. But for this year, which is what we're trying to do, what can we do for this year, we're able to use it to cut some cash out. The second thing that cuts some cash out is that we are no longer going to Back Bay Mission. The numbers continued to decline, and then we had some illness. There was never another group from a different church that was going to be at Back Bay, so it was just us that week. And we reached a point where, given the numbers and given the situation here, it just didn't make sense to make the trip this year. And so we canceled that, and that added another $2,000, I think, back
To
into
that's the mission budget.
Oh, it's in the mission budget. Well, it cut our overall, but we dropped some cash on that side. And then, were there any other things that we did to the budget that took money out of programs?
Well, what we did is we asked, there are some folks, when they do their pledge, they don't make an allocation to operating, undesignated, or mission. At one time, our operating was about 80% of all the total budgets, and then the mission was 20%. So we put a rule, if folks do not do an allocation, we just automatically make it an 80-20 allocation for their pledge. And so we went to, Miss Shirley did a very nice email to those folks and asked them if they would be willing to consider making a change to 100% operating and not any allocation to the mission budget. And there were $6,821 that has been added to the operating budget, but then that gets taken out of the mission budget. So if you take that number that Jeff started with 83,000, you add the reduction expenses of almost 8,000, and you add operating about 6,800, and then over this process, some people actually increased their pledges by $1,000. So that's how we got the $15,711 in reduction of the 83,000 deficit for 2022.
And the other thing that Laura mentioned earlier that's very important to keep in mind is that, this is all with the actual budget through April, so the first 4 months. So we have a pretty good idea how expenses are tracking. Our next time to get back to everybody is going to be in July, where we'll have the first 6 months' numbers. And at that point, the year is going to be pretty much identified. We'll know what the gap is.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to make some adjustments to the 67.6 number? Possibly. We've got a couple ideas that we want to talk about there. But for the most part, by the end of June, we'll have enough expense data to know what's going to happen. So it's going to be somewhere in that $65,000 range, to be honest. Yes, Roxy?
Doesn't the insurance premium go up if you pay quarterly?
It's not enough to, it may be like $25 a check or something like that. It's nothing that's going to double it or anything like that. No, good question.
Well, actually, the agent, because I went over the budget with our insurance agent, and she says, why don't you make it 10,000? So that's why we use 2,500 for the reduction in the, or what we're going to be paying in November. Yeah, so we'll be, commercial insurance is just gone because of the hurricanes, the fires, the flooding, tornadoes, everyone is being hit. And actually, since we've had Guide 1, our insurance has hardly changed at all. In fact, we've seen some declines and some very little increases, but last year was the biggest increase that we've experienced. And this, again, is just catching up.
Yeah. So as you can tell, if you just kind of look at this is the number we have, and this is the shortfall, 100,000 versus 67.6. If we were just to look at today and do nothing beyond today, say this is it, we've got enough money to cover 2022 if we don't do anything different. And we'll go into 2023 with about $30,000 in the bank. And assuming that the expenses are flat moving into 2023 from 2022, if we have, and pledges remain the same, we're going to have $33,000 over here and $60,000 over here. So the shortfall will hit in 2023 if we don't do anything else. But here's what we want to do today, opening up today on May 15th and closing on May 31st, seeing all these numbers, the pledging process window will reopen. And if anyone wants to make adjustments to their annual pledge, this is the window to be able to do so, however you'd like to do it, whatever you'd like to do. All those will close at the end of the month of May. Then the three of us will get back together, look at those numbers, see what that might do to the 67.6 shortfall. Hopefully it'll drop it a little bit. We don't know how much. And then we'll have the June actuals, and then to somewhere around the middle of July, I don't know if we'll have a congregation meeting or if we'll just do it electronically, we'll share the results of what that all looks like for this year.
Yeah.
But I think the key isn't this year, to be perfectly honest. The key is 2023, 2024. And if you looked at what Laura talked about earlier, it's this number here, 44. And that's the pledge units. And so and we also know that somewhere between, each pledge unit historically has been somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 a pledge unit. You can do the math as to how many, here's the gap, divide it by $4,000, and you can see how many pledges we would have to add to our budget to make it a balanced budget. If you go back to the early number dates on the list, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, you're looking at somewhere between 60 to 70 pledge units. You've got roughly a balanced budget, and we're at 44. So there's, you may have heard me say before, there's no way we're going to cost reduce ourselves into profitability. It isn't going to happen. The only way we're going to do this is that we have to grow the church. And that role, and that's not what we're not, our little threesome wasn't designed to address it, but out of the data you can see growth is the key to making the budget and making the church thrive. And, we've had a couple of hurdles thrown at us the past few years. Now hopefully we're over those, but we just have to think about how that moves.
And I'd like to add for 2023, we're looking at 39 pledge units, and if nothing changes between now and next year, we're going to be looking at a very substantial, we're still going to be dealing with like an $80,000 deficit. However, we may have to look at what we want to do for the mission budget. And that's something the congregation has to decide. When folks are asked to pledge next November, people are going to have to be very prayerful of what they want from this church. And I know mission has been a cornerstone of our church. And I don't see the mission budget going away. But we may need, in fact, since we're the finance committee, I would have a difficult time even putting together, I guess I could put a mission budget idea out there in front. I don't want people to say, okay, now I can pledge to that, but there's some things that we can do, and it'd make it a much smaller mission budget, but there's ways Jeff and I can work together, and Connie, how we can put a mission budget that we can still have some support, but at the same time, not abandon the mission concept in our church, and that the other monies can go to support us on the operating. Whether that makes us solvent or not, I don't know. It's hard to grow a church in 18 months.
Oh.
It just doesn't,
I think we can be safe to say it won't happen. It won't happen in 18 months. But what we need to see is that incremental growth. We need to see the fact that just like we saw the decline didn't happen overnight, it took time to get to where we are. It's going to take time to get back to where we need to be. But it's not going to be up to the council to do. It's not going to be up to Greg to do. It's not going to be just up to the people out in the pews to do. It's going to be all of us having to do the same thing. We're all going to have to reach out to friends and family and invite them to church. We're all going to have to, as Greg talked about in the sermon today, we have to talk about why church is so important to us and what it means to us. And, the trend is what we need to see. It won't be fixed like a light switch. But if we don't start making the movement that way, it doesn't give us a lot of options later on down the road. Rox?
I've got two things. One thing is, what kind of percentage would it take to get, a rate around the deficit? What kind of percentage? Can you throw out a number?
Percentage on what? Giving?
Oh.
Giving? Well, if you're saying we got 44 pledge units right now and our gap is $67,000, that's probably $1,250 to $1,500 per pledge. Is that what you're getting at? How much each pledge would have to raise to get to a balance? Okay, so yeah, if you say if your average pledge is $5,000 and you need to add another $1,500, what is that? 30%?
20, 30, yeah.
30%
Might be 25,
everybody have to increase their pledge by 30%.
Okay, so without membership increase, that's a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's-
Yes.
that's
And
a
people
ton.
are already giving a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a very generous church. This has always been a very generous church as it comes to pledging. This is not a church that, hides behind people and says, I'm not, this is a church that is very strong and not only making their pledges on the pledge card, but meeting their pledges at the end of the year.
And to build off what Roxy said, I think it's actually a great question, because we didn't come out and say, hey, we need everybody to add $500 to their pledge, for a couple of reasons. One, that's just kind of not the history of how we do things on pledging at the church, but more importantly, it's always just the personal relationship between you and God, and what's going on in your life, and what you can do, and what makes sense for you to balance everything together. And that's the only way to look at it, is to lay out the situation here, explain as clearly as we possibly can where we are, and then it's up to everybody in the church to figure out how they can help change that, knowing that some of it that may not necessarily be changed in the next 18 months. But how can we all help do that? And I'm going to go steal something from the stewardship. It's not just treasure, it's time and talent.
Mm-hmm.
And this is even probably more so where time and talent are critical for our future survival. I mean, treasure is important, don't get me wrong, but.
Yeah.
But.
So on the second point I wanted to talk about was, I've brought some things, we need to increase our membership. Talking to friends and family is great, but that's not going to cut it, right? We need to get on the street. We need to evangelize. And I've been talking about this for a while. Bruce, where I mentioned that I've been feeling kind of lonely and unconnected. But I'm getting into these things. I got some stuff I brought today that I got from the United Church of Christ website, some handouts. I bought some pens. I got some buttons. I'm wearing one today. But we need, why can't we go to the street, like in front of the Jewel and this and that, to talk about our church?
And that evangelism point is a good one, and I want to put it down. I don't want to push it down too far, but I mean that's the key. What the three of us had charged to us to address is the financial situation. But one of the other goals was how to grow the congregation. One of the things that came out of the SWAT. So and this is a great segue to. Yeah, they are directly related, but that's a great segue possibly for Bruce, if you want to come up now and talk about the status of the other three SWAT goals, which I think we'll get to the evangelism piece. You want to do the pulpit?
So there were three other SWAT goals that came up. One was to evaluate the goals that we are working on and seeing if they matched up with our missions and vision values, and they do. So we considered that one closed. Another goal was to figure out how to energize the congregation to make decisions more efficiently and to embrace change. So that's where evangelism and getting energy and getting people involved in what we're doing, that's where that comes from. So some of the things that we are working on are communicating to the congregation the things that we are actively doing and through the various channels that we have, and to figure out a way to engage you, to let you know how you can participate, how you can help, who you need to contact if you want to participate in different various activities. One activity that is coming up is the Spring Cleanup Day, where Building and Grounds works to straighten up and clean up and make the outside of the building look nice, all the gardening. The last time we did it, Building and Grounds did it. It would be great if we could get a lot more participation. So what we're going to do is to figure out ways for everybody of whatever ability you have, you can participate. If you can get out there and do a shovel and do some weeding and do all that, great. If you can draw a picture, great. If you can pot a plant, great. we'll take whatever we can get, and we'll work with Jeff to figure out what that would look like. Cleaning cobwebs, even greater, yes. Because we just have a few, just a few. Also, another couple of other things that we're looking at is the volunteers that are working in the church, a lot of them are, silent. They work behind the scenes. And what we want to do is to publicly recognize them and thank them for the work they're doing. There's a lot of stuff that happens that people don't realize are being done by the people who they're sitting next to in the pews. So it's just to let them know that there are things that are being done outside of just Sunday morning, so that you can say, oh, well, I didn't know that was going on. I'm good at that. I can help you with that. And the other thing is that with hospitality, we're going to try and make it theme-based when it's appropriate. So if there's a birthday or a major celebration, maybe we'll have a birthday cake or just something to, make it fun to come to church. So it's not just a drudgery. So those are the things that we were talking about for the third goal. Sarah, do you want to talk about the final goal?
Okay, so I had the fourth SWAT goal, and we broke that down into two parts. One was about inviting inactive members to return to worship, and the other was about taking advantage of our activities and events to make them stickier for more involvement. So the first goal, we ran into a couple of quirks that we'll work on, and we'll get them fixed. One is that we don't have a great infrastructure between our really diligent care deacons who have a lot of great stories about what's going on with individual members of our congregation, as well as our pastor who meets with a lot of members of our congregation. But that belongs to those two groups, really. So we quickly realized that we couldn't just call people and say, hey, come on back, without sort of knowing why it was that we weren't seeing them. So our original plan was to try to do some of that gathering during Easter, but that is a busy time, and we just didn't get that task done. So that's something that we have to keep working on so that we have a better a better understanding of who we're calling and what story we're stepping into. And then the other issue was about how to outreach to individuals, because that is a kind of personal decision, and not everyone feels comfortable or would find appropriate the same kinds of communication. So we know that there's some generational differences, maybe some of our more churched members, right, who've been in church their entire lives would appreciate a phone call, because a phone call feels like a really sincere form of outreach. However, if someone called me, I'd never know, because I don't answer my phone. I sort of forgot that it has that feature. Because millennials don't like phone calls. They feel assertive. And this is a weird thing to say, hey, come on back, is a weird, like that doesn't match, right? So I would much prefer a text message that I could look at and say, oh, someone's thinking about me. That's so nice. And then move on with my day, right? So we have to figure those pieces out. That's going to have to include some people who are interested in figuring that part out. Because right now we can't ask our care deacons to do it. They're really diligently already reaching out to people. And so we need this like other group, right, who can have good communication so we know what's going on with our members when we don't see them for a while, and then figuring out what's the best way to reach them. And we know from the discussion on this goal that that's a little bit of a contentious topic around here, because we certainly have members who would prefer that we do it the way we've always done it, which is to just call everyone. But we know we have to be a little more conscientious of that and recognize the way people would feel appreciated and respected in those calls. So we have to figure that out. The other one we're already starting on. I think we're starting to make good progress. So this is about making events stickier. So to the point of evangelism, the church has a bad record of just random sidewalk evangelism, right? Like the church at large. And I don't know about you, but most progressive communities do not like Bible thumping. They do not feel comfortable approaching strangers to talk about Christianity on the street. I certainly don't feel comfortable doing that, nor would I feel comfortable being approached in that way. So one of the ways we're talking about making events stickier is to say we're already doing great things in the community. We could just make those events more accessible to more people. There's a sign out front of the church about garden plots, because we already offer a great thing. We just need to be more accessible. We walk in the Buffalo Grove Pride Parade. It's a great thing. And for a lot of our unchurched friends and family and community members who are uninterested in church, they might still be interested in the Buffalo Grove Pride Parade. That's a thing you can invite people to without feeling like you're inviting them into a system that they may not be interested in. So that's why we have little postcards out on the table so that we can invite people to march with us, so we can show up for our LGBTQ community. In addition to that service that morning, because this is on a Sunday morning during our normal worship time, our worship time will be outside as a prayerful event to send our marchers off to the parade, because not everybody can march in a 7/10 of a mile parade. And so for those who can't, there'll be an opportunity to pray for the LGBTQ community, to pray for the outreach of marching in the parade, so that more people can be involved in more aspects of the activities. And going forward, that's the goal, right, is to take the things we already do, like summer suppers, the things we already do, like the PADS program, and say, well, how else can we make it bigger so that we can invite people to the thing that we're doing? I don't know how many people are just running around looking for a church, but a lot of people are running around looking for a community, and a community who's doing something good in their community. So the more things we can do for a community that we can invite people to, that's, I think, the prevailing idea of this goal, is that that's how we get people to come. And then as they come, we can anticipate that they'll fall in love with us, because people who come here do that, and then we'll have them be pledging members one day, right? Like all of that is really long-term thinking, of course, but that's sort of the idea behind what we're doing. So Back Bay Mission is a little bit of a, we had some ideas on stickiness for that one, but not doing that. We'll just turn tables over to summer suppers, that sort of thing. Some other things you're hearing about, we have something like 30 views on our live stream every week. We average about 22 to 30. That's a huge number of live streams. The more of us who interact in the comments and that sort of thing, the more that feels like they're part of our community. And then we're on Instagram and Facebook, and the more you interact on those social media platforms, and Pastor Greg mentioned comment, and it was in the newsletter, comment, and some of you have, so thank you. It's not just me who sees those comments, right? It's anybody who comes across our work. And especially Facebook gives us lots of tracking tools. Hold on just a second. Facebook gives us lots of tracking tools, and when you all comment, I get new views. I get reports that we have new views on our stuff, because when you comment on something, it changes the algorithm for your friends and family, so they start to see our stuff too.
Okay, can you give us an example for us who may not know how to comment on Facebook or Instagram? What do we do?
Okay, so the question was about how to comment on Facebook and Instagram. So the best, liking stuff is nice, and giving hearts on Instagram is nice, but that actually doesn't change the traffic to our site. Words change the traffic to our site. So one way to participate in that is to comment literally anything, an amen, an emoji. If you're sort of busy, you can just sort of randomly swipe your keyboard and put letters. It really doesn't matter. You can like each other's comments as well. That actually helps in terms of having a post that has more activity on it. And then on Instagram, you can watch and share stories, and that is also really helpful. If you don't know how to do that, I can actually show you how to do that on your phone. That's probably the faster way. We'll have a social media tutorial. It'll be great. And then if you're, anytime you can share stuff, right? So if you're sharing a post from our page to your page, that's the ultimate of sharing, right? Because then all of a sudden your entire circle sees that. And I do, so every Sunday there's a post and a story. And then during the week, I'm trying to be a little more diligent about making sure that there's a midweek post. So around the food drive, there's always a food drive advertisement, which is a great sticky event to share, because you can just see, one, that we collect food for our neighborhood. And two, that there's easy drop-off points and lots of people involved. It's a great activity to have it be more visible. And then, I try to do sort of innocuous things like pictures around the church that are just pretty. So if you're someone who shares flowers, you can share the picture of our church's flowers, right? And then, again, it doesn't feel like hitting anyone over the head with evangelism. Instead, it feels like what I think evangelism could feel like, which is just an invite into something that's important to your world that could be important to someone else's world. Very much like we heard in our sermon, right, about being the church for people. These are little ways that we can start doing that. So we have a couple of things. BG Pride Parade, that's the biggest one. Even if you can't march, if you know people who might want to march, give them a postcard, or just give them my email address, which is also on the postcard, and I'll give them all the details that they need to march. And then summer suppers, I think we usually end up sort of with more volunteers for that than we can actually do with it. But that's okay. It's good to have people. People can be here praying for the people who are getting food. People can be here writing notes to add to the, we could just add jobs if we had more volunteers, right? We'll figure those things out. But those are also really good opportunities to make those events stickier. And then those are the two, but just to really quickly go back to the idea of tracking up, following up on members we haven't seen in a while. if you know someone who is sort of not coming around for a reason, sharing that with the care deacon, sharing that with Pastor Greg is really helpful for us so that we can sort of know when we reach out to people, hey, this person isn't coming because of this reason. And then when we do reach out, we can just be a little thoughtful and sensitive around those things. Questions? Let's see. Yeah, the question was about the date for the Pride Parade, which is Sunday, June 5th. The parade is actually at 11, but they ask all of the volunteers to be lined up by 9:30. So there'll be some worship details coming out about how worship will change that Sunday for our congregation, and then our marchers will go off. Also to represent our church to a huge community in all the people that come to the Buffalo Pride Parade. I think we're one of 10 or 11 faith communities that show up to this parade. So it's important for us to be there. Yes, Art. Yeah, so for the parade, there's a sign being made that will have our church information, our church name, and then we'll all be there. And we're giving out little bracelets as a sort of celebration. Everybody's throwing stuff, candy, that sort of thing. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank everybody that's presented today. You really have presented it well. You presented it in a positive manner with enthusiasm, and we need that. And that is really, really good. I think one of my concerns is that going forward, how do we maintain that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've been at a certain fever pitch before, and it hasn't been maintained.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't anybody that orchestrates, and I think that's one thing. You know, I like everything you're saying.
Yeah.
Except for the one thing on the cleanup day, the stickiness will lead to sweat.
Let me recap for the audience online. So no stickiness on church cleanup day, fair. And the other is about how we sustain this, and that is certainly an issue. And for example, the reaching out to members is an issue of, but who's going to sit down and do that work?
Frankly, that thing has been out there for quite some time.
Yeah.
There are members that are not coming, but are maintaining contact in certain ways.
Yeah, and I don't want, because I don't want to undercut the work that care deacons are doing, because I think we have better contact with our members maybe than we ever have before, especially during the pandemic when cards started coming out and just regular correspondence. So that's all really good work, but this is a different message of, like, we just miss seeing you. But, and I don't know anyone who doesn't want to know that they're missed, certainly. We just have to figure out how to tell them that they're missed without it feeling like, shame, shame, we see you, right? And that, I think, is one about thinking who it is that we're talking to and how we could approach them in that. Yeah, so if you're the person calling or texting and then to suddenly step into a much larger picture would be really daunting. I don't know anyone volunteering for that particular job. So, but that's something that we also know over the summer is a little more manageable in terms of time. So we have an infrastructure piece to put together, which I think like by the end of May, we could have that where we've sat down with care, sat down with our pastor, and sort of gotten the bigger picture of who are the people we're calling and what are the stories we know. And then we can spend some time calling, and especially when events are coming up, right? Like a more regular outreach to say, this is coming up, you may not have heard about it, but we'd love to see you there. So that it feels more like an active invite, which we know we have to do, but doesn't feel like we're stepping into, you could have hurt relationships or hurt feelings, or there might be other life events, and we don't want to step into those. It's literally my job to make it sound enthusiastic. Yeah. Thank you.
But we do need other things and other ways to be creative, which you are also.
We do.
And so hopefully we'll pursue it.
I'm not ignoring you. I'm checking comments on the live stream. There was another hand. I want to make sure I get. Yeah, Roxy.
Another thing too is there are several people that I'm friends with on Facebook that aren't used to come, but don't come. So that's another way to connect. If you have friends on Facebook that used to be here but aren't here, you could just send them a little message asking, telling them that it'd be nice to see you.
Yeah, so Roxy's comment is about following up with like people you know in your circles and letting them know. But and on Facebook, which I think is great, and people you have relationships with are going to be an easier outreach to. The one thing I do want to remind you is that just not seeing people in this room isn't an indication that they aren't actively participating, because, like I said, we do get 22 to 30 views on our live stream. I can't tell you who those views are, because that would be some real Big Brother stuff. I'm sure YouTube knows who you are, but I don't. But we certainly see the traffic drive through the midweek. Some of that, I'll admit, I think is some of you actually who are rewatching things, and some of it is just our members who aren't watching live on Sunday, but they are catching up with church during the week. Those are all still really good health indicators, though, that we're just offering church in another way, right? Instead of just attendance on Sunday being the only indicator. I want to be conscientious of time because we're almost at an hour. So last couple of comments. Yes, Pat.
I just have quick questions for everyone here. I don't hesitate. How many of you are interested in belonging to a small group?
Did you all hear that? Pat's asking about small group participation.
Who are interested in belonging to a small group? And it's okay if you put your hand halfway up. I get that too. Okay.
You talking about like the better things to do?
Right. Like your perfect.
I'll raise your hand.
She liked this too. I firmly believe that a strong church has small groups, and I know we've started and stopped and started and stopped, and then once again, to Tom's point, and those of us who've been around for a long, long time, and many of us have, there's not consistency. There's not a consistency in these things. I'm supposed to be positive, but that's just a statement, right? So I am interested to see that a lot of people are interested in small groups. Okay, good to know.
So in terms of consistency and keeping things, keeping energy to things, I find at work, when we have, say, checklists, we have these checklists and people get excited about them and they do them for, 6 months or 7 months. And then people get used to it and they stop using it. So I think consistency is one thing, but I think the consistency we need is the consistency to keep evolving. So if we do something, great. But if we see it starting to wane, think about how we can change it up to make it more interesting again. So I think that's how we try to address keeping that energy going.
And I just wanted to add too, because I got this email from Debbie, and it's a very well-organized spreadsheet, so I want to share it. There was the prayer group that met on Wednesday nights during Lent, and then there's also like an online group that just communicates about the prayers that they're sharing. When you add up all the prayers and prayers for the circle of care, you get to the total number of prayers of 429. I just love that. That's such a beautiful thing, and it's such a math mind. So I just wanted to share to that end of small groups that we just sort of inadvertently during the pandemic figured out that actually our church needs all of these things in a couple of different modes. So meeting in person is great, having some online meetings, and then some like low commitment but high communication groups. So, it like a lot of answers to those questions for the internal stuff. Although my SWAT goal is specifically about more outreachy things, but certainly the active life of our church is part of that. Lou, and then, yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to, with that too, that we so often forget that there is a kind of talent sheet that's available to anyone. And there is a list of, one of the questions on there was, are you interested in a small group? And there's a list of people on it.
Yeah.
So I can send it to you. I mean, we have it on Slack, but when you need things or need somebody, don't forget the time.
Yeah. Good. And Sandy? Oh, sorry. We have time and talent sheets to recruit volunteers. I'm repeating that for the live stream. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so we do. We have a book group, the Rainbow Callers, who's been going strong for 22 years. And that's, I want to just add, in part because some solid snacks happening at those meetings, like some really excellent snackage going on there. And you have to read the book. I'm just putting it out there. Like, they're not messing around. You got to read the book. Yeah, Connie. Yeah.
I'm really glad everybody's here today, and I continue to be proud that I'm a member of the church. I want to speak to a bigger umbrella issue. When you think of church, you think of us here, a community that gives to each other and is compassionate to each other. The idea of church in our country has radically changed, and we need to acknowledge that. We are not alone in our dilemmas here. I want to make that point. All churches, all denominations, Protestant and Catholic, are declining because of an umbrella of issues, and we need to remember that. We need to remember that the church, as it has seen in the media and the world, tends to uplift the negative aspect of what it means to be a Christian and what it means to be a Christian in these days. Christian nationalism is everywhere. And if you don't know what I mean, I'll be glad to talk to you. But next time you see a movement or a rally, see how Jesus' name is put on a poster. See that, and remember that's partly Christian nationalism, and when people think of the church, most often, that's what they're getting. We have to be, we, not just this church, the whole church of the United States and the world need to be a message to the world of what the gospel is and what witness is and what community is. Suicide attempts are up among our young people and all people of ages. They don't feel they have a place. The church can be a place and should be a place for people who are struggling, who need to have somebody say, I'll listen to you, I'll care. Be the church. We've bought a new little banner to put outside. Oh, well, little. It says, be the church. And it lists, show compassion, show community, feed the hungry. That's what we have to tell the world. This is what church is in 2022, not what the other stuff you're seeing. We can make a difference. Many churches are doing simple things that they get, and here's a secular term, branded. We need to find our brand, how we stand out to this community as that's the church that feeds people, or is social justice, or it's a drop-in center for kids who need to talk. That's what's happening. Many churches are now sponsoring people who come in who talk about things that are not churchy, but they are things that people need a place to talk about things. And a lot of those churches are being known and make their name out and are evangelizing in a new and different way. Witness, I'll give a plug for social justice. Every Saturday from June, July, and August, we're going to be out in the Parkway, and we're going to be witnessing for social justice issues. If you'd like to be part of that, please talk to me, and I'll be glad to, excuse me, let you know what we're going to be doing. It does make a difference, that little witness out there. We get people who talk to us, and we explain, this is a church that we feel this is important. We do get some other comments, but we don't listen to those. We are for the gifts of God, for the people of God. We have these gifts. So that is what I wanted to share, and that I hope we can all be the witness. And remember, we're not alone. We've got each other. We've got the Spirit that's here. And we've got God who seeks to support us and guide us. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from anyone? Any other thoughts, anything people want to share? Good. Oh, wait, sorry. Yes, Chris. Oh, this one, so you're talking about this column over here? Yeah, so if you look at the headings, it's the operating and mission budgets for the various years. So in 2013, then look at the undesignated. So it's going to be, those 4 lines equal the total amount of the budget. So really, they've stayed relatively similar. Those are actual. That would be actual. Actual dollars. From 13 through 21 would be actual dollars, total, right? Correct. And- Okay. Got it. So that's the total dollars pledged in 2013 was 252,000. At that time, 77,000 went to operating, and then 123 went to undesignated, which would be to whatever the case may be, and then 52,000 was pledged to mission. Another way to kind of a cheat sheet way to look at it is you take undesignated and operating and add them together, and then mission is because undesignated are dollars that are up to the discretion of the church as to how to spend it best. Does that answer your question, Janelle? Yeah.
Christie's. Yeah.
Christy's question? Does that answer your question, Christy? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the
That's doable.
60 is kind of the unofficial magic number for balance.
I know we could talk about this all day, and I appreciate the energy. If you have further comments, questions, concerns, feel free to call us, text us, email us, see us in church, or see us on the street or at the Piggly Wiggly.
But the one thing we mentioned it earlier, and just want to reinforce, the pledging is open again
Yes.
between now and the end of the month, and the forms, that's the question. We don't have a form here. However, if you want to change your pledge, please let Shirley know. And Shirley, could you raise your hand? She's sitting next to Stanley Tucci.
Yes.
And right, and if you don't have her contact information, just leave a message on the phone number there, and the message will get to her, be able to talk. Again, the confidentiality about pledging is something we hold near and dear to everybody's heart. We want to make sure we honor that and respect that.
Absolutely. I'm going to invite Pastor Greg up for comments and to send us home.
Thank you, everybody, for your thoughts, for your dedication to this process, for your research, and for leading us in this meeting. Connie made some very good points. The church, the faith community in general, as an institution, is in decline. Our task is not to be taken down by that, right? We are doing the best we can. We have excellent resources. We have excellent human resources and dedicated people in this congregation to make us solvent and to continue to be God's hands and God's voice in our world. In terms of, the experts tell us that decline happens gradually and then suddenly. One of the things that COVID did was shine the light on the cracks, right? And that's what we're seeing. COVID has advanced by about 10 years the decline of many industries, one of them being the church. and other industries as well. You can tell when you're driving down the street and there's empty storefronts, right? However, when we seek to grow our congregation, to make disciples, we cannot do that through the lens of a dollar sign. If our sole purpose of growing our congregation and making disciples is a dollar sign, we've missed the mark. Okay? So I just want to make that point. The other point that I want to make is something that's been kind of brewing for a few months now. As a congregation, we often, and as individuals, we often dwell on the things that we don't have. We don't have this. We don't have that. This has changed, right? The challenge for us is to be grateful for what we have, because what we have is a lot. I see churches all over the city, our denomination and other denominations. There are churches 3-4 times our size that I may or may not have served in my past that don't do anything near what we do. We feed the hungry. We shelter the stranger. We clothe the naked. We help feed people with garden plots. You know, but for COVID, we would have been going to Biloxi, right? We do these great and wonderful things, and that, my friends, is what we need to focus on. Not what we don't have or what we used to have and we don't have anymore, what we have. Asset-based thinking rather than deficit-based thinking. And I think that viewing what we have in a lens of gratitude will move us forward, right? So in terms of our goals and objectives and a checkered history of pulling the trigger on some of those goals, I am here to help, right? As a pastor, I have to ride that thin line between being your cheerleader and putting my boot print on your butt. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm challenging you on the business of the church and I approach you as pastor on a personal level and you tell me, oh my gosh, I need to get my committee report in, it just breaks my heart. I don't want to put myself in a position as a taskmaster, but I do want to put myself in a position where I'm supporting you and helping us go forward, to move forward with these goals. Does that make sense? So I would be delighted to be included in your meetings and to give my observations as someone who's witnessed the broader church and those trends and other possibilities. All right? So I think we have a lot to offer, and our task right now is to break these things, break our goals into attainable chunks that will set us up into best practices that we can evaluate and we can attain incremental growth, right? That was the plan from the beginning, is to attain incremental growth, right? There is a lot of love in this room. There's a lot of talent in this room. That's why when you proposed to me, I accepted. I love what we do, and I love pastoring here, right? And I'm here to help and move things forward. So we have some wonderful, blessed worship and work to do, and that's our cue to go forth, right? Thanks. Thanks.